Every single subscription means more than you know, and I truly appreciate your support. If you enjoy stories like this, please subscribe to the channel. It helps me continue bringing you the latest updates and in-depth discussions. Today, we're taking a closer look at the quiet changes surrounding Bad Chad Customs, the kind of changes that many people may have overlooked. This story didn't begin with a loud argument or a dramatic confrontation. There were no slammed doors or explosive moments that immediately signaled something was wrong. Instead, it started almost invisibly. During what seemed like an ordinary evening, the house was quiet. A soft light illuminated the kitchen after another long day at the shop. Chad had stepped outside for a few moments, leaving his phone resting on the kitchen counter. According to Jolene, she wasn't searching for secrets or trying to invade anyone's privacy. She simply happened to be standing nearby, reflecting on another exhausting day spent helping run Bad Chad Customs. For years, life at the shop had followed a familiar rhythm. Sparks flew as metal was cut and welded. Creative ideas filled the air faster than anyone could write them down. The workshop thrived on controlled chaos, and everyone had an important role. Chad was the visionary, the builder capable of seeing potential where others saw nothing but scrap metal. Colton brought fresh ideas, youthful energy, and his own creative style. Jolene often served as the steady influence that kept everything balanced. When stress built up or disagreements emerged, she was usually the one who helped restore calm and keep the team moving forward together. That balance had worked for a long time, but in the weeks leading up to that evening, something felt different. It wasn't a dramatic change that viewers would immediately notice through YouTube videos. It was subtle. Conversations became shorter. Important decisions seemed to happen more quickly, and with less discussion than before. Chad appeared increasingly focused on the future of the business, often checking his phone late into the night and responding to messages almost immediately. He wasn't hiding anything obvious, but his attention seemed fixed on plans that occupied more of his time than ever before. Colton also seemed to be changing. During certain conversations he became quieter, less interested in long discussions about future projects, and occasionally left the shop earlier than usual. At first, Jolene assumed the pressure of running a successful creative business was simply catching up with everyone. Building custom cars while constantly producing online content brings endless deadlines, financial responsibilities, and the challenge of staying creative year after year. Anyone would eventually feel that pressure. Still, the uneasy feeling continued to grow. The three of them were physically working in the same space, but emotionally they seemed to be drifting in slightly different directions. Then everything paused for a single moment. A notification appeared on Chad's phone. The screen lit up with a small vibration, displaying only a name and a brief message. To anyone else, it probably would have seemed completely ordinary. There was nothing romantic, shocking, or obviously suspicious about it. Yet something about the wording caught Jolene's attention. It sounded less like casual conversation, and more like someone discussing future plans that appeared to already be moving forward. That was what made her stop and think. For years, Jolene had been involved in nearly every important conversation about the future of the shop. She wasn't simply standing on the sidelines. She helped shape decisions, solve problems, and plan the next steps that kept the business growing. Seeing a message that suggested major discussions had taken place without her knowledge left her with an uncomfortable feeling she couldn't easily ignore. It wasn't proof that anything was wrong. It wasn't evidence of betrayal, but it was the first moment she realized something might be changing beneath the surface. Sometimes the biggest turning points don't begin with dramatic arguments or obvious conflicts. Sometimes they begin with small moments that seem insignificant at first until you look back and realize they were the beginning of a much larger story. Seeing a message that suggested major plans were already moving forward, without her even knowing about them, left Jolene with an unsettling feeling. It was like walking into a room where an important conversation had already begun, yet no one had thought to invite her. She didn't pick up Chad's phone. She didn't scroll through his messages or search for more information. She simply looked at the notification preview until the screen faded back to black. In that quiet moment, something inside her changed. It wasn't anger. It wasn't jealousy. It was realization. Sometimes the most significant discoveries aren't hidden secrets, they're quiet confirmations that the feelings you've carried for weeks may have been right all along. When Chad returned to the kitchen, Jolene didn't confront him immediately. She didn't raise her voice or demand explanations. Instead, she waited, knowing that some moments need time before they can be understood. Later, she asked him a simple question: "What's happening?" At first, Chad looked puzzled. Then she mentioned the notification. His expression shifted almost instantly. It wasn't the reaction of someone caught doing something wrong. It was the look of someone who immediately recognized exactly which conversation she was referring to. The discussion that followed was surprisingly calm. She simply looked at the notification preview until the screen faded back to black. In that quiet moment, something inside her changed. It wasn't anger. It wasn't jealousy. It was realization. Sometimes the most significant discoveries aren't hidden secrets, they're quiet confirmations that the feelings you've carried for weeks may have been right all along. When Chad returned to the kitchen, Jolene didn't confront him immediately. She didn't raise her voice or demand explanations. Instead, she waited, knowing that some moments need time before they can be understood. Later, she asked him a simple question: "What's happening?" At first, Chad looked puzzled. Then she mentioned the notification. His expression shifted almost instantly. It wasn't the reaction of someone caught doing something wrong. It was the look of someone who immediately recognized exactly which conversation she was referring to. The discussion that followed was surprisingly calm. She had contributed to major decisions, solved problems, and worked through difficult moments alongside Chad. Now, important discussions seemed to be happening without her knowledge. That realization weighed heavily on her. The notification itself wasn't really the problem. It simply represented something much larger. Quiet change. A change that had already begun before anyone sat down together to discuss it openly. Over the following days, Jolene became more aware of subtle shifts throughout the workshop. Conversations between Chad and other team members happened more quickly. Decisions were made with greater urgency and less collaboration than before. The atmosphere itself felt different. The shop no longer carried quite the same family-like energy it once had. Instead, it seemed to be evolving into a more structured, business-oriented operation where efficiency often took priority over lengthy discussions. Meanwhile, Chad appeared fully committed to pushing the business forward. His focus remained fixed on future opportunities, new projects, and keeping the shop competitive. From his perspective, adapting to change may have seemed necessary for survival, but from Jolene's perspective, the cost of that progress felt increasingly personal. Sometimes relationships don't change because of one dramatic event. They change through dozens of small moments that seem insignificant on their own but gradually reshape the way people communicate, trust, and work together. By the time anyone notices the difference, the change has often been happening for much longer than they realize. Colton also seemed to be finding his own path. He was becoming more independent, making decisions based on his own instincts, and moving at his own pace. Meanwhile, Jolene gradually found herself stepping back. She wasn't leading conversations the way she once had, or helping shape every decision that affected the shop. Instead, she spent more time observing than guiding. It wasn't because she wanted to distance herself. It was because the dynamic around her had quietly begun to change. For years, Jolene had been the person who held everything together. She bridged different personalities, eased tension during stressful moments, and helped keep communication flowing when creative disagreements appeared. She wasn't simply part of the business. She was part of the foundation that allowed it to function.